Here's the thing they taught you in Economics 1001 that was almost certainly wrong. The story goes like this. Primitive societies bartered, chickens for grain, labor for cloth, and eventually that got too complicated, so someone invented money to make trading easier. Clean, logical, almost certainly fiction. Anthropologist David Graeber spent years looking for the evidence. Actual archaeological evidence, written records, anything that showed a real society running on large-scale barter before money existed. He found nothing, not a thin trail, nothing. No village, no city-state, no civilization on record organized its economy around people haggling fish for sandals before coins showed up. The barter economy, as described in virtually every introductory economics textbook printed in the last century, appears to be a myth that economists inherited from each other and never bothered to verify against the ground. So what was actually first? Walk into a Sumerian temple complex around 3000 BC, not a market, a temple, and what you find are clay tablets covered in careful accounting. Grain in, labor out, debts owed, credits earned. The priests weren't facilitating trade between merchants. They were running what amounted to a redistribution system, tracking obligations across an entire community. That's the earliest monetary record we have. Not a coin, not a price tag, a ledger of who owed what to whom, which means money didn't emerge to solve the problem of barter. It emerged to track relationships, debts, duties, obligations between people who already trusted each other enough to defer payment. The market didn't create money. Money, or something very close to it, had to exist before markets could function at all. That's the paradox this story keeps returning to, and it gets stranger from here. This is unpriced risk. Everything made sense, right up until it didn't. Here's what makes this genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. The Sumerian shekel, the thing historians call the world's first monetary unit, was not a coin. You couldn't hold one. It was a measurement. Specifically, the weight of grain required to pay 1 month's labor. A number on a clay tablet recorded by a temple scribe, enforced by the institution that also fed you. That's it. That's money's debut. Workers at and Uruk received ration credits, not grain handed directly into their palms, but entries in a temple ledger saying they'd earned the right to collect from the storehouse. The scribe who wrote your credit was the same administrative class that decided whether you'd collected correctly and whether your debt was settled. Priest, accountant, and debt enforcer were often the same person, or at least the same office. The temple wasn't adjacent to the financial system. It was the financial system, and here's the part that quietly breaks the standard timeline. We were taught that money came first, then debt, that once you had a currency, people started borrowing it. But the Sumerian record shows something different. The credit came before the commodity. The promise preceded the thing being promised. Debt didn't follow money into existence. They arrived together, inseparable, born in the same administrative act. A scribe pressing a stylus into wet clay on behalf of an institution that was simultaneously spiritual authority and granary operator. Which raises a question the textbooks don't linger on. If the first money was a promise recorded by priests, and those priests functioned as the first central bank, then what money has always fundamentally been isn't a thing at all. It's a relationship, a claim one person holds over another, ratified by whatever authority both parties agree to fear. That authority has changed a great deal over 5,000 years. The underlying structure, less so. Around 600 BC, a king named Alyattes ruled Lydia, a small but wealthy kingdom in what's now western Turkey, sitting on rivers that literally ran with Electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. He didn't invent money. He did something more specific and more consequential. He minted it. Small bean-shaped lumps of Electrum stamped with a lion's head. The lion wasn't decorative, it was a declaration. That stamp said, "This weight is guaranteed by the thrones." You didn't need to bite the coin or weigh it yourself. The king had already vouched for it. What Alyattes actually created wasn't a new material, it was a new form of authority pressed into metal. Here's why that mattered. He had an army to pay. Mercenaries don't accept promises recorded in distant temple ledgers. They want something portable, something they can carry into the next city-state and spend. Grain credits from don't travel well. A stamped coin does. Alyattes solved a very practical problem. How do you move purchasing power across geography, quickly, at scale? You standardize it. You brand it. You make the king's face the guarantee. The Greek city-states that followed understood this immediately and added a twist that Aristotle noticed and recorded plainly. Coins derived their value from decree, not from the metal itself. The stamp matters more than the substance. Athens and Corinth didn't just mint coins, they demanded tax payments in their own master-stamped coins specifically, which meant if you wanted to settle your debt to the city, you first had to acquire city-issued currency. Suddenly, everyone needed it. Demand wasn't organic. It was legislated into existence. Two pressures pulling the same direction. Armies needed portable pay. Tax collectors needed a standardized thing to count and verify. Coinage answered both at once, and the old temple credit system, flexible, relational, local, started losing ground to something harder, more portable, and controlled by whoever held the die that made the stamp. That shift from priestly ledger to royal coin wasn't just administrative. It moved the seat of monetary authority from. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable, because what happened in Song Dynasty China wasn't a mistake born of ignorance. The officials who made the critical decisions knew exactly what they were doing, at least at first. The Jiaozi started sensibly enough. Around 1023 AD, the Song government took over what had been private paper certificates used by merchants in Sichuan province, formalized them, and issued the world's first government-backed paper banknotes. The logic was elegant. Instead of hauling heavy iron coins across mountain roads, merchants could carry paper. The notes represented coins held in reserve. Trust was the bridge between the paper and the thing it promised. For roughly a century, it worked. Then the Jin dynasty started pushing south. War is expensive in ways that accountants understand and generals prefer not to discuss. The Song court needed money faster than taxes could deliver it, and here was the printing block right there in the treasury. The temptation wasn't irrational, it was completely understandable. Print more notes, fund more soldiers, hold the northern border. Every single official who approved another print run could point to a genuine military emergency. Nobody was embezzling. They were governing under pressure. But the notes kept coming. Within decades of mass printing, the Jiaozi's purchasing power had collapsed. Merchants who'd accepted the notes in good faith watched them become nearly worthless in their hands. Then Marco Polo arrived in Kublai Khan's China roughly 2 centuries later and sent back accounts that left European readers baffled. The emperor, he wrote, could create wealth simply by printing it, and everyone accepted it on pain of death. Europeans read this as magic, or tyranny, or both. What they couldn't quite see was the warning buried inside the wonder. The paper was never the problem, the restraint was. Here's the twist: nobody wanted to put in the textbook. On the evening of August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon sat in front of a television camera and announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. Just like that. The Bretton Woods Agreement, the framework that had anchored global finance since 1944, was over. Nixon framed it as a temporary measure. It was not temporary. What followed was the moment economists had been dreading and arguing about for decades. Milton Friedman had predicted that free-floating currencies would find their natural levels efficiently, that markets would sort it out. Keynes had warned that without discipline, governments would spend themselves into chaos. Both men were partially right. Both missed something bigger. Because here's what the 1971 announcement actually revealed. It didn't change how money worked. It just stopped pretending. Even under the gold standard, there was never enough gold. Banks had always issued more claims than they held metal to back. The ratio varied, the rules shifted, but the gap was always there. Paper promises outnumbering physical reserves by a wide margin. The gold wasn't the foundation. The belief that you could get the gold was the foundation. That's a completely different thing. Go back further and the pattern holds everywhere. Mesopotamian clay tablets recorded debts that circulated as payment. Roman coins were debased so gradually that most people didn't notice until prices did. The Song Jiaozi worked until it didn't. Every single one of these systems ran on the same fuel, enough people agreeing at the same time that the thing had value. There was never an era when money was objective. Not once. The gold standard wasn't the solid ground we thought it was just a more convincing story. And the question that follows from that is the one nobody in power particularly wants answered. In October 2008, 2 things happened. Lehman Brothers collapsed, taking with it the illusion that mortgage-backed securities were safe assets. They were assets in the traditional sense. They were trust instruments, layered promises about future payments. And when enough of those promises turned out to be wrong, the whole stack came down. It echoed, almost exactly, what happened to the Song Dynasty's Jiaozi 8 centuries earlier. Paper backed by confidence, collapsing the moment confidence left the room. That same month, someone calling themselves Satoshi Nakamoto published a 9-page white paper, Bitcoin. The opening paragraph doesn't hide what it's about. a payment system that removes the need for a trusted third party. The distrust of central banks isn't subtext, it's the whole point. That's the fork in the road we're still standing at. Because while Nakamoto was building a system designed to cut institutions out entirely, those same institutions were quietly building their own version. As of 2024, over 30 countries are developing central bank digital currencies, programmable money issued and tracked by governments, running on ledger technology not entirely unlike a blockchain. Same tool, opposite philosophy. And here's the thing that's hard to shake. Whether you're looking at a Sumerian clay tablet from 3000 BC or a blockchain entry from last Tuesday, the underlying structure is identical, a recorded promise enforced by some authority that people have agreed, for now, to trust. 5,000 years of monetary history, and that part hasn't moved an inch. The technology changes, the institutions change. The story we tell about why the thing has value changes, but the requirement that enough people believe it at the same time in the same room, that's never changed once. Thanks for watching Unpriced Risk. See you soon.